Well, good morning. Welcome to Vive, and if you're watching online, we're glad that you're also part of this service and get to be a part of what's going on here this morning. We are wrapping up. This is our last week of our Esther series. Has anyone enjoyed the series? Anybody got a little something out of it? Feel like maybe you understand the book of Esther a little bit better, and hopefully you understand a little bit more about purpose and in our lives and how God brings that about. And there's something about the story of Esther, I think, that just resonates in our hearts. The fact that it's one of those comeback stories. It's one of those turnaround stories. The whole book of Esther is about that. It's actually, there's a festival, a Jewish festival that's celebrated every year called Purim, which it has to do with the Jews being saved from Haman. And it's about reversals, and it's just an exciting story. And we love stories like that. There's something in us that is drawn to stories of just reversals and comebacks. The books we read, the movies that we watch. We love it when things turn around, when there seems to be adversity and things that maybe someone was not able in the natural to overcome, but they overcome it. One of my favorite stories is a story about Bernie Marcus. You may not know that name right now, but you're familiar with him, I'm sure. He was the son of a poor Russian cabinet maker, and he lived in Newark, New Jersey. And in 1978, Bernie was fired from a do-it-yourself retail store, hardware store called Handy Dan. Anybody remember Handy Dan? Yeah, no, you shouldn't. Unless you're old, right? All the old people are like, I don't want to say it. But anyway, Handy Dan, he was fired from Handy Dan. And what do you do when you get fired from Handy Dan? Well, you team up with a friend of yours who also got fired from Handy Dan, and they decided to start their own business. Maybe you've been to one of his stores. They're called Home Depot. And today, they have stores all over the world. And their annual income is in the billions of dollars. What a cool turnaround story, right? Maybe I love it because I like to go to Home Depot. But another story, a great story of just a comeback person and a turnaround situation is Wilma Rudolph. Maybe you're familiar with her story. She was the 20th, I didn't stutter, 20th of 22 children. That was one busy dad. I'm just saying. No cable. They must have lived up north too. 20th of 22 children. She was born premature, and she almost didn't survive. When she was 4 years old, she contracted pneumonia and scarlet fever. It left her with a paralyzed left leg. When she was 9 years old, she decided to take off the metal brace that had been supporting her and helping her up to that point, and she began to walk without it. At age 13, she developed what's called a rhythmic walk, and the doctors said it was a miracle that happened. And that same year, she decided to run in a race. And she entered the race, and she came in last. And for the next few years, every race she entered, she came in last. Everyone told her, quit, give up, don't keep running. And one day she actually won a race. And then she won another race. And from that point on, she won every race. And that person, that young girl who was told she would never walk, she went on to win 3 Olympic gold medals. Wilma Rudolph, what a powerful comeback story, isn't it? You know, General Douglas MacArthur was turned down not just once to West Point, but twice. And on the third time, he went in and he marched his way to the history books. Albert Einstein, the guy who developed the theory of relativity, maybe you've heard of him, right? You know, he was expelled from school for being dumb. That gives hope to us, right? Yeah, I feel hopeful now. And in a 6-month period, Albert Einstein taught himself calculus. How about Thomas Edison? He was kicked out of school. Teachers told his mother he was too slow to learn. And so little Thomas was homeschooled by his mom. And at age 10, he already had his own chemistry laboratory set up. He gave us over 1,300 inventions that have radically changed the way we live life. We love these comeback stories. We love it when things turn around, right? So when it comes to our story, when it comes to your story, why can't you see the possibility of things turning around? What is it? What is it in your life when things are going on? Maybe people are telling you can't do it. Maybe circumstances are slapping you in the face. What is it about your story? Why can't you and I sometimes see the possibility of our situation turning around? Or is it just for others? You know, maybe you had hopes and dreams. I'm sure you did, and I'm sure you do. Those hopes and dreams developed into plans. And maybe when you look at your life today and you look at your situation, you say, this isn't what I planned for. This isn't what I hoped for. This isn't what I saw my life becoming. I never saw divorce. I never saw being a single parent. I never saw losing my job, my career changing. This isn't what I planned for. This isn't what I signed up for. See, things happen in our life. Things that we don't plan for. Things that hurt. This morning, with God's help, I want to encourage you. I want to help you if I can, with the help of the Lord, to help you get unstuck. Because sometimes we get stuck. Sometimes we get stuck when things happen. Over the last several weeks, we have looked at purpose, and we've looked at the life of Esther, and we looked at how God has a plan, and you have a purpose. You have a purpose because He has a plan. And we talked about your purpose requires your participation. Pastor Chuck talked about that. And last week, Pastor Dave talked about how your purpose requires persistence. This morning, I want to talk about your purpose is perfected through your pain. The book of Esther is one of those greatest comeback stories. It's such a turnaround. But the book of Esther, the story of Esther, actually started way before Esther became queen in the palace in Persia. If you look back and you see about 120 years prior to Esther becoming queen, you see something that happened to the nation of Israel. See, the nation of Israel enjoyed God's blessings and His provision, and He had just poured out His love and His provision upon them, and they turned their heart away from God, and they turned to idols, and they turned to things that were unhealthy for them, for the people. And 120 years prior to Esther becoming queen, the nation of Israel was attacked, taken into captivity. And let me tell you some of what happened in the process of that, because it wasn't a simple little, hey, we want you guys to come with us. They destroyed their homes, probably took everything they owned. Probably people were raped. I'm sure people were killed. It was ugly. People were enslaved. Talk about human trafficking. It happened. They were taken into captivity into Babylon. And then later would become the Persian Empire, and they were part of that empire. But it was ugly. It wasn't smooth. It wasn't comfortable. It wasn't an easy transition. These people experienced pain that they didn't plan for. Struggles. And I'm sure they thought maybe their hope is gone. This is the story of Esther. This is how Esther came to the palace. And even in Esther's story, her own story, I'm sure it wasn't as simple and as easy and elegant as maybe sometimes we like to read into the story. Esther had dreams. She had plans. It probably wasn't to be one of God only knows how many women. Maybe she had her eye on some young man, and that all came to a crashing halt. Maybe she hoped she would have children and she would raise them in her family and teach them. That all came to a halt. And so the way Esther came into the palace was one of pain. It was a process. And God used that pain to position her for her purpose. See, if it wasn't for the children of Israel, if it wasn't for Israel being attacked and taken into captivity, think about it. Who would have been there? As Haman rose to power, as his disdain for the Jewish people just began to grow, who would have been there to stop it? Who would have stopped that evil flow of vengeance, the evil attack of the enemy? But see, God was able to position her, but it was through pain. We don't like to think about that. We like to think that following Jesus should be a bed of roses, or at least, everything going close to our way, right? I mean, we don't like to think of it like that. We don't like to think that pain is possibly a part of this situation and our circumstances, but it is. And I'm sure that you've all wondered, I have myself, we've all wondered at times, God, do you know where I'm at? Now, I know theologically, I've already got the answer to that question. I know God is omnipresent. I know He's everywhere, but there are times that I've asked, God, do you realize where I am right now? Do you realize the pain, the trial, the discomfort? Do you realize the circumstance that I'm going through right now? Maybe you've asked those questions, I'm sure, at some point. The book of Esther can be summed up really in one New Testament verse of Scripture. It's one of the probably favorite verses of all Christians, and it's in Romans chapter 8, verse 28. Maybe you have it memorized. Maybe you already know it. But if not, let's read it together. It says, "And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God and to those who are called according to His purpose." What a powerful verse of Scripture. What powerful words. That we know that all things work together for good to those who love God, for those who are called according to His purpose. This is our promise. This is God's promise to us. But I'll be honest with you, when you're in the midst of it, you don't necessarily feel it, right? See, God's plan was never pain. It was never pain. But God's plan will never be derailed by the sinful acts of others. God's plan for your life will never be derailed by pain. Your ex who left you for another woman didn't ruin God's plan for your life. The drunk driver that killed your family member can't frustrate God's purpose for your life. The evil person at work that lied about you and got you fired, that didn't divert God's purpose for your life. See, God's plan and God's purpose is way bigger than that. And no matter what happens in our lives, it cannot divert you and I away from God's purpose. Pain and suffering was never a part of His plan. Never a part of the original design. But because of sin, and sin entered the world, sin entered the world through the disobedience of Adam and Eve. And that sinfulness opened the door to disease and death and pain and struggle and selfishness. And unfortunately, we live in a world that is broken and full of death, disease, disorders. Pain and suffering is weaved into every area of our lives. You probably think, hey, I thought you were going to encourage us, I'm working on it. I'm getting there. Pain is a part of life. We don't want to admit that. We somehow want to think that somehow we will be shielded from it. We won't have to go through it. Some of you know pain like no one else knows pain, and you haven't even lived that long yet. You've suffered pain at the hands of maybe parents who were irresponsible or relatives who were irresponsible. Maybe because of the stupid act of somebody who you didn't even know, but you experienced pain from it. But something inside of us just keeps hoping that somehow we'll be shielded from it. That as we go through life, it's not gonna, it's not gonna hit us. It's not gonna get us. I wish I had some magic wand, some pixie dust, some way of praying pain away from us. But the reality is, pain is a part of this world because of sin. And we're not going to be able to go through life and be shielded from it. Sometimes it's going to hit us, and sometimes it's going to hit us hard. Sometimes we wake up and say, this isn't what I expected. And sometimes in the midst of our pain, this is the real tragedy. It isn't so tragic necessarily the pain that we experience. The real tragic part is we exchange our pain, we exchange our hope that we have for the pain that we receive. We exchange it. See, pain is all we have left from our plans that have been destroyed. We have hopes, we have dreams, we have ambitions, and we have this idea of what life could be and should be for us. And when things happen and they come against us and we experience that disappointment and that frustration and that pain, sometimes all that's left is the pain. It's the pain of those plans and those hopes that were destroyed. And if you think for some reason, if you have the idea that pain is all that you have left, it's hard for you to let it go. Let me explain that. See, because we sometimes think this is all there is. This is all there's left of my dreams, is the pain that I'm feeling. And sometimes we feel like if, in some weird way, if we let go of this pain, we're letting go of our purpose. We're letting go of our hopes. And so somehow we feel like we've got to hold on to the pain of that divorce, or the pain of that loss, the pain of that experience in our lives, because if we don't hold on to it, then somehow our purpose won't be fulfilled. Somehow the dreams that we had, the dreams that were shattered, won't ever come to pass. Let me encourage you this morning. The pain that you're going through, the thing that you've experienced, the frustration in your life, it's not the destination. It's not your destination. Pain is positioning you for your purpose. As hard as that is to embrace. And I know sometimes it's not a yippee feeling. It's just, it's just a matter of, I'm going to stick with it. There are times when I feel like I'm in a river and I'm just being carried along by the current. You ever felt like that before? And then there are times where I feel like I'm not even in a boat. I'm just hanging on to the raft. Right? You ever felt like that? And things happen. But here's something I've learned. If I can dig deep this morning and share something that I've learned in life, is that pain positions us for God's purpose. 3 months before we were supposed to launch Vive Church in the summer of 2010, Robin and I had probably one of the hardest situations that we've ever been through with the couple that were a part of our launch team. They hurt us deeply. It was so painful. The disrespect, the backbiting, it was insane what happened. Unnecessary. A bit immature, stupid, all of that. But it was so painful for us. And we wanted to quit. We wanted to quit before we even got started. You ever been there? You ever felt like quitting before you even got started? And it took everything in us to just keep moving forward, keep going forward. But we didn't want to in the flesh. We just wanted to run. We just wanted to go somewhere else. You know what? I'm so glad. I'm so glad. So I think back about the pain that we went through. I think back about the experience we went through that season in our life. Where would Vive Church be? And I'm not talking about the building. I care less about this building. This is nothing. Where would you be? I think about people whose lives have been transformed, people who have been brought to life. Where would you be if I tucked and ran? I wanted to. I wanted to exchange my hope and my dreams for the pain that I experienced, because the pain was very real, and it felt like that was our destination. That was what we were going to continue to walk in, but we didn't. Your pain is not your destination. What you're going through, the circumstances that you're in. Maybe today you're not feeling the pain. Maybe you're not, but at some point, something is going to happen. See, God will turn your situation around if you'll turn your situation over to Him. Instead of embracing the pain, instead of holding on to it because you feel like that's all I've got. Don't deny me. Don't deny me the pain. Don't deny me. I want to hold on to it. And if you'll turn it over to Him, He can turn your situation around. He can position you for purpose. He's preparing you for something. And Romans 8:28 is such an encouraging passage of Scripture. I mean, it is life and breath to those of you and I who are following Jesus. That all things, even when people backbite you, even when people hurt you deeply, when you trust them, even when you've experienced deep sorrow and loss, all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to His purpose. Those are words of encouragement. Those are words of life to us. Let me explain something, though, to you. Those are not words that are just a blanket promise to all of humanity. They're not just a hey, everybody, it's all going to work out, right? We've said that before. We've maybe echoed those words. Oh, it's going to work out. Listen, sometimes it doesn't work out. Sometimes it doesn't. But for those who follow Jesus, and I know, man, it just sounds really exclusive, doesn't it? Because we don't like exclusivity in our culture today. This promise is very exclusive. Exclusive. It is for those who love God and are called according to His purpose. It's not a blanket statement for all of humanity that, hey, bad things are going to happen, but it's all going to work out. I wish I could say that. I wish I could make that promise. But if I did, I'd be watering it down. This is a promise for you and I as we follow Jesus. That God has a plan for your life and my life. He has a plan for everyone's life. But those who choose to walk outside of God's plan, It doesn't always just work out. So I've learned that people without this hope, people without this understanding that God is going to work everything out with people without that kind of hope, they lose their minds when things happen in their world. They lose their minds. They run here and there, and they're just scrambling for answers, and they're bitter, and they're harsh, and they get so calloused in life because they don't understand the hope that we understand, that God has a plan for our lives. And no matter what happens around us, no matter the fact that there is pain in this world, it's not going to divert you from your purpose. God is going to work it together. He has that ability. He has that supernatural ability. And you know what? He loves you that much. He loves you that much that no matter what it is that you are experiencing, He'll take that and He'll use it in some way. And you say, how in the world could God take something that is so ugly and so painful? How can He do it? I don't know. I don't know how He does it, but He does it. I've watched Him do it in my life over and over and over again. How He takes those things and He uses them for good. See, the promise of 8:28, Romans 8:28, is not for those who go to church. It's not for those who call themselves Christians. It's not for those who think they're good people. It's for those who love God and are called according to His purpose. Sometimes in the midst of our pain, we just have to reaffirm our love for God. Because I don't know about you, but when I go through painful things and I go through loss and I go through circumstances, sometimes I question, God, do you still love me? Because I'm not feeling it. I'm not feeling it right now. I'm feeling hurt. I'm feeling things that are going on. And sometimes I just need to reaffirm, God, I love you and I trust you. And just be reminded that God does love us and that He's working things out. See, if we're not careful, though, we hold on to that pain. And we allow that pain to be the thing that keeps us from experiencing God's promise and His purpose in our lives. The promise is for those who love God, and the promise is for those who are called according to His purpose. You know, the word church is a Greek word. Well, the Greek word that's translated church is ekklesia. Ekklesia means called out ones. You and I have been called out. We've been invited. We didn't go pursuing God. We didn't go chasing after God. Even if you grew up in church, how many of you grew up going to church? Come on. You're like, God didn't have to go far to find me. I was under the front pew, right? Mama drugged me to church when I was, a couple weeks old. Just because you were under the front pew didn't mean that you chose Him. You hear me? Just because you were there when you heard sermon after, you didn't choose Him. He chose you. He chose you. He pursued you. He pursued me. We're called out. And that calling out is more than just inviting into a relationship, but it's a calling out. See, we're called to be different. We're called to live a different life, to walk a different way, to process life differently. And one of the ways we do that is we have this hope and we have this understanding that there is a God that is so big and so powerful and so awesome and so loving that no matter what happens around us, He can take those things and He can use them for good in our lives. I get asked all the time, well, why? If God's so powerful, He's so loving, why doesn't He just wipe out pain, right? Doesn't it make sense? I mean, if God's so powerful, so loving, why doesn't He just remove pain? Why doesn't He create a place that is pain-free? Well, He has. It's heaven. He has created that place. But can I get a little theological with you? Just a little. I just want to go not too deep, but just if God were to remove pain from this world, He would have to remove our ability to choose. Because it's your choice that sometimes brings us pain, or me pain, or somebody else. It's your choice that brings maybe a spouse or kids. It's your kid's choice. It's all these choices. It's choices people make around us, and those choices affect our lives. And so, not only would He have to take away our ability to choose, but we would no longer have the ability to love, because love is a choice, right? No one forces you to love. Love is a choice. And so you understand, here's the situation that we're in. God never planned for us to go through what we're going through, but it was our choice that got us there. But what He can do in the midst of it, and what He will do, not just what He can do, but what He will do, is His promise that He will work all things for the good. So maybe this morning, you're feeling the pain. You've lost a job. You've been falsely accused. Maybe you're just tired of being single. Maybe you still feel the pain of the divorce and the things that you've gone through, and you feel that loss. God has a plan and a purpose for your life. James chapter 1, verse 2 through 4 says this: "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, when you face trials of many kinds." Wow. Consider it pure joy when you face trials of many kinds. Why? Because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you can be mature and complete, not lacking anything. See, God's preparing us. He's molding us. He's shaping us. And pain, the things that you've gone through, the things that you're going through, are preparing you. A couple weeks ago, where's Christian? He must have left. Oh, he's in the back. Little Christian, he said, "You know what I want to be when I grow up?" I said, "No, what's that?" He said, "I want to be like you." It's like, you want to be like me? I don't think you want to be like me. Be like somebody else, not like me. I think about, when I thought about, when he said those words, I thought about James and John, and, Jesus, I want to sit at your right, I want to sit at your left. And Jesus said, "Are you ready to drink the cup that I'm going to drink from?" And they're like, "Yeah, bring it on." No. See, God prepares us. I want you to be a pastor. You go for it. God's preparing all of us. He's prepping us. Why? Because there are people who need us. And we live in a broken, sin-cursed world. And people are literally, they're losing their minds because they don't have the hope that you and I have. But God is taking the pain in our life, and He's perfecting our purpose, and He's positioning us for greater purpose and influence. Stop it. There's a story in Genesis chapter 37 through 50. It's a great story. If you've never read Genesis 37 through 50 and you never read the story of Joseph, you need to take some time to do it. I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes right now, but you need to read it sometimes. Great story. It's a powerful story of a turnaround. So Joseph is about 17 years old, and he's Dad's favorite, and he's a bit arrogant. He's about a bit cocky, like maybe sometimes we are when we're 17. But he had these visions and he had these dreams, and he shared them with his brothers, and his brothers said, you know what, we hate you, and we hate that you're dad's favorite. And so one day they decided to fake his death, and they sold him into slavery. They sold him to some slave traders who took him to Egypt. And he got to Egypt, and he was sold on the block to Potiphar. And Potiphar, his wife, falsely accused him. And so he ended up in prison. And in prison, he suffered again just disappointment, because the people that he thought would be there and help him out whenever, when they got their chance, they forgot about him. And then he had his moment, and he had an opportunity to interpret a dream of Pharaoh's, and God gave him the interpretation of the dream, and God elevated him to second in command of all of Egypt. And here is Joseph at the pinnacle of success. He's at the top of the ladder, and he's probably thinking, man, look at this. Look at how God just turned a bad situation into good, right? And then his brothers show up. And he had an opportunity, could have really screwed him big time. Could have really put it to him. And he played with them a little bit. Read the story. He messed with them a little. But then one day he revealed, this is who I am. I'm Joseph. And so everything's hunky-dory. Dad moves to Egypt along with all the family. They're all safe. Everything's great. And then all of a sudden, Dad dies, and they get really nervous because Dad was holding it together. Dad was always the one that if Joseph was like, it's your turn now, Dad would be there. Hey, chill, Joseph. Chill. Dad's gone now. And so they get a little nervous in verse 18. His brothers then came and threw themselves down before him. We are slaves, they said. But Joseph said to them, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? Wow. Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? I don't know what you're going through right now, and I don't know what you're going to go through, but I'm sure that something will happen. And when you feel that pain and when you feel that struggle, especially if it's at the hand of someone else, maybe you can remember those words, am I in the place of God? Because it's really easy to put our attention on the source of the pain. But he says, am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. The whole talk about purpose is great. It's exciting, and we are people of purpose. But when it gets down to it, if we want to get really honest and get really real, and we want to get really deep, we've got to understand that God uses pain in our life. He uses pain in our life to perfect that purpose and to position us. He wants to do something through your life. I don't know what it is. I have no idea. But I know this, it's great. It's great. It's amazing. But if you hold on to your pain, if you hold on to it, what happens is we put our faith on pause. We stop because we're holding on to something. We're holding on to broken dreams. We're holding on to something that we thought this is not the way that it was supposed to be. Maybe God is positioning you for something greater than you could even imagine. I'm sure He is. Can you imagine how life would be if we quit embracing the pain and we started to embrace our purpose? And when pain comes at us and things happen to us, we understand, God, you're working it out. You're working it out. No matter what the circumstance. I'm not saying you got to put a false smile on your face. I'm not saying you got to, be super positive, but God, you're working it out. People keep asking me, how's the house going in Chapin? Guess what? It hasn't been touched in over 6 weeks. And about 4 weeks ago, I felt like God said, quit complaining. It took me 4 weeks to figure that one out. I'm not complaining now, Lord. But it's like, man, sometimes, things just don't go the way we thought they would. We embrace our purpose. God, you have purpose for my life, and you're working it out. I don't understand it. I don't understand what's going on. Maybe you found yourself in that situation today, but you understand this, that God is working it all for the good. See, you were born for such a time as this. You were born for such a time as this. Would you stand with me? Let me pray for you. Father, God, I'm so grateful for your purpose, your plan. It's bigger. It's more amazing than what we could even think. It's hard for us when we go through things. You understand our weaknesses. You understand our struggles. Maybe that's why in the Garden of Gethsemane you sweat drops of blood. You understood the struggle. Father, I pray for each and every one this morning that maybe is in a season of disappointment, a season of pain, a season of struggle. Maybe they're trying to make sense of what's happening or what has happened. And God, would you infuse their hearts this morning with hope? Would you remind them again this morning that you have a plan and that they were born for such a time as this, and that you can take that pain and you can use it to perfect your purpose. You can take that pain and you can take what the enemy has meant for evil and he's tried to destroy them, and you can use it for your good. You can position them for what you have in store for them. God, we thank you for doing that. This morning, maybe you're here and you're not in a right relationship with Jesus. Can I pray for you? Say, you know what, Pastor Randy, I'm not where I need to be with God. And maybe there's something inside of your heart that says, I want to be in a right relationship with God. That's the Holy Spirit. That's God calling you. Father, I just thank you for doing that. I thank you for faith this morning. Would you pray this prayer? Just say, Jesus, come into my heart, my life. I want to follow you. I trust you. I trust you. I give you my life. I give you my heart. In Jesus' name.
Starlight in the dark, endless smiles can't conceal you. In every glimmer it's a spark, catching fire as you break through. Oh, you're not far away. Coming close, and oh, even as I wait, you're coming close. You're like summer in the night. The sun goes down, but still I feel you. every shadow's turning bright. Every broken heart is made new.